And welcome to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor here at Whiskey Politics. Find me at davesussman.com. All of our platforms, including the Range Broadcasting Network, The Independent, our podcast applications, including Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and the Ricochet Network. And you can also find us on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you're updated. You know, there's so much going on right now with just about a week left before the election. How you feeling, folks? Are you exhausted yet? Holy cow. Wow. This is just, just when you think you've seen it all, what's the Spinal Tap thing? We're just going to turn it up to 11. Yeah, we're going to turn it up to 11. Why not just make 10 bigger? Because it's 11. Anyway, we are in the midst of silly season. I think we've been in silly season now for quite some time, just as the state of our politics. But I really want to get into some of the bombshells that has been released over the past few days that the mainstream press and the tech titans are trying desperately to hide from you because they don't believe that you have the ability to discern information other than the information they determine you should know. This is really scary times, folks. If they're doing this before a Biden is elected, could you imagine what they'll do after? Pretty scary stuff. But to discuss all this, I'm delighted to have one of the smartest guys that I know that's out there, that's so well connected and highly respected. And, those folks that are out there that just know everybody, and more importantly, everybody that knows them trusts them. And with that trust, they get information that they're going to put out there to the public for us to be able to discern, like adults, whether or not it should be taken seriously. If you watch Laura Ingraham over at Fox News, you probably will recognize this guy. In the last week, he's been on Laura Ingraham, not just once, but twice. Because of his bombshell articles released with Peter Schweizer about the Hunter Biden email scandals that both the tech titans and the mainstream media are ignoring, of course. Matt Tyrmand has worked with Project Veritas and Open the Books. He is a Lincoln Fellow over at the Claremont Institute, an incredible organization, and a Haggerty Fellow over at the Conservative Partnership Institute as well. He's a contributor in many different publications, including the European Conservative, the National Pulse. And hey, listen, when you talk to this guy, you think he will also be the next ambassador to Poland, as his work with understanding in that country and Eastern Europe goes far beyond many in the Beltway. And he's somebody that I'm proud to call a friend. Matt Tyrmand, welcome.
Sussman, you're too kind. Unfortunately, I'll never be ambassador to Poland. I've got dual citizenship, and it is a rather correct assessment that, if you're a citizen of two countries, you can't be an ambassador representing one, and I'm not giving up my citizenship. Oh. Plus, you've got the added problem that if you Google me, it's all filled with all sorts of shenanigans. So
yeah, and it's going to be filled with a lot more in the next few days, and we're going to get into that because you are taking some serious attacks. Well, let's do this because a lot of people are not in our echo chamber. For the first time on Thursday night at the debate with Trump and Biden, they heard about this email scandal. The mainstream media have essentially squashed it to the point where most people don't really know what's going on. Let's do some basic strokes right now. Sure. Talk about the Biden email scandal, or as many people at this event I was at last night were saying, BLM, Biden's laptop matters.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting because it's all obviously the timing of such. It's October before November 3rd election, but there's three different sets of emails and sort of information centers that are they started moving concentrically, and now they're sort of being put together, and they're all so corroborative of each other. But obviously you've got the Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, Hunter Biden laptop. And then I came out with Peter Schweizer, Bevan Cooney. Bevan Cooney is one of Hunter Biden's business partners who went to prison in Oregon in a sort of, a low security facility. And we'll talk about some of the drama that's ensued since we released this stuff. But he actually reached out to me by way of a contact that I had made years ago in Chicago, who happens to be serving in the same sort of low security, white collar infraction federal facility. Short stay, Bevan Cooney, he got in last year. He's supposed to be out next month, though it looks like they might try and extend his time in there and not release him out of some sort of retributive action, which is one of the reasons I'm doing so much press, is to call attention to this, because I really believe that the Fed should be talking to him. He's a walking, talking evidence dossier about what went on in the Hunter sort of coterie of gangsters, Devon Archer being the ringleader, Jason Galanis, Jason Sugarman, some LA guys actually, who are involved in all sorts of influence peddling. And I really take away from this that Hunter Biden is maybe the greatest in American history scofflaw when it comes to foreign agent registration. He was helping foreign governments get a lot of access to high-ranking U.S. government officials. Obviously, the Chinese having meetings in the White House with his father and other administration officials. That would usually require a FARA, a Foreign Agent Registration Act, piece of paper that you have to file with the Department of Justice. And none of these guys ever filed those papers. They kind of hid behind the veneer that they were engaged in business. But this was real serious high-level foreign influence peddling. And then what I also discovered in Bevan's emails was, and this had never really been reported, is money laundering. They were laundering money for a Russian mob-tied Kremlin oligarch named Yelena Baturina. Her name first came up in Senator Ron Johnson's investigation, where there was a $3.5 million slug of money paid to Hunter Biden and Rosemont Seneca from her. And best I can tell, that was a fee for helping her get money into the U.S. and get her a JP Morgan account. So there's all sorts of different things going on here. And then the third piece of information that came from a different source was what came out later this week, which was Tony Bobulinski, who was a C-suite executive in one of their projects called Sinohawk, which was supposed to be doing bringing Chinese companies to the U.S. for investment and other sort of bilateral Chinese-American investment opportunities. And of course, when you're investing with high-ranking Chinese businessmen, they're usually tied to the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So any business that the CCP-tied companies do in the West or domestically usually has a pretty strong political mandate from on above, from the Politburo, so to speak, of the Chinese Communist Party. China is a state capitalist nation and combined with communism, and so the state-owned enterprises are very, very politicized, whether it's Huawei and the telecom technology, or HNA, which is a company, a mega conglomerate that is a haven of Chinese Communist Party intel people, and that's a company that's been buying up American assets for years, and they've been doing business with guys affiliated with HNA as well. So I mean, there's all sorts of things going on, and Tony Bobulinski's emails are very corroborative of what the laptop suggested, which is how close Joe Biden is to this. They even were talking about business. Tony Bobulinski, Joe Biden, that's one of the things he disclosed. So when Joe Biden said, I never had any contact with any of these people, what my son did was what my son did, and I wasn't a part of it. Well, the guy who ran one of the major businesses, he says that's not true. We met with Joe Biden. We talked about it. He knew what was going on. And some of the laptop emails that Rudy and Steve put forward have even breakdowns of economic participation rights in these businesses, how much equity they're getting. There's one oft quoted now line that Hunter's getting X amount of equity, and another 10 points for the big guy to be held by Hunter. The big guy, also aka the chairman, was Joe Biden, according to what we can put together through these emails, as well as Tony Bobulinski's corroboration. And then the Bevan Cooney emails also show there's serious corroboration that they're marketing Hunter's access into the administration. They talk about we have to market our other currency, which is direct pipeline into the administration. In the same email string, which I'll be talking more about this coming week, they talk about Hunter Biden's HB's dad's union relationships as a way to market themselves with certain counterparties who would appreciate those affiliations. And then they say, we are going to cite that to justify the ask, as in how much money they're going to pay us or how much equity we're going to get in a joint venture. So there's real very, very delineated tie-ins between these counterparties.
There's so much to this, and there's so many moving parts. And I think this is one of the things that the media and the left, and certainly the Biden campaign, are hoping that will impact people when they take a look at this. And it just seems like there's so much to this that people are kind of confused by it. So let's kind of pull it all apart and put it back together again. You got this Bevan Cooney. He's in a, as you correctly stated, he's in a minimal security prison. He reached out to you as an investigative reporter. First of all, why would you have taken him in as an audience?
Well, so as I said on Laura Ingram's show, it was a little circuitous. I have a contact that I had known in Chicago many years ago who ended up being in the same facility with him, who reached out to me in late September and said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but it's me. I'm not going to say his name. I just want you to know I'm in the same facility as Bevan Cooney, and I've been spending a lot of time with him, and he wants to talk. He wants to get his story out there. And this guy who I knew, who became close to Bevan, he had remembered the stuff I'd done with Peter Schweitzer in the past. On Ukraine, Burisma, the case that Peter wrote in Secret Empires and Profiles of Corruption, 2 of his books that address
and the Clinton Foundation.
What's it? And the Clinton, oh yeah, Clinton Cash, of course. I worked on that by distributing it in Europe and just being involved in that rollout from a media perspective. But the Ukraine Burisma, I worked rather directly with Peter, sourcing the team on the ground in Kiev to pierce the corporate veil of Burisma and figure out what Hunter's role was, how much he was getting paid, when the board meetings were, who attended, where they were, so that we could, put together a more cogent fact pattern. And so this guy, my contact, he had remembered my connection to Peter, as well as the other work that I've done with these other organizations and going after public sector corruption. And so he had talked to Bevan, and Bevan absolutely wanted to talk to me. So we actually set up a few calls from them on the inside. Again, low security. They had access to talk to people on the outside, and built up a relationship with him and spoke to him and said, look, I will give it my best efforts with my network and my knowledge of doing forensic auditing of public sector corruption to go through what you put forward to me to see if it is relevant to the current debate. And he gave me access and written authorization, and I got written authorization for Peter to actually log into his Gmail and go through his emails. And that took me the better part of long days for a few weeks before we rolled this out, which was pretty much concurrent with
there were
Rudy.
Thousands, right?
The top of his Gmail, and it was clogged. It was blocked because he had no more data or no more storage space. So there was on the top right, when you see the amount of messages, it was 26,740 strings covering about a decade of activity of his personally, and a good 6-7 years of his activity partnered with.
And you went through
Hunter
that.
And Sugarman and Glanis. Yeah, I mean, to the best of my ability, it wasn't super easy, to get in there and extract the emails for evidence, because there are all sorts of complicated things with 2-factor authentication and downloading the documents. But we were able to get what we believe is all of the relevant material out of it. And start analyzing it, which we did. Peter's team in Florida, me, and just conversations I had in my network. I know quite a few China experts, as does Peter. And we started having, long days of analysis and phone calls to kind of walk through. Because unlike the mainstream media, which is, propagandist left who would not cover anything bad for Biden, but they would, go after Don Jr. or Eric Trump for jaywalking, and that would be, a great scandal. We don't throw shit against a wall and make it stick. We consider what we do a serious role and mandate to do forensic analysis and forensic auditing, and not to just throw it against the wall. So we did a very deep dive into certain storylines, especially in China. Russia, Ukraine had obviously been well run out over recent years. Peter had kind of written a book on that. That's why I went to Peter, was because he had literally written the book on the subject. So that story was very well telegraphed and well known. But some of the Russia stuff, the incrementally new Chinese stuff, and Kazakhstan stuff as well, we've run out of story on them bringing around the Kazakhi high-ranking officials. Very corrupt government, as Peter calls it. These 4 countries are like the UN of global corruption between Russia, China, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. And so we put together some rather incrementally new storylines by going through the emails and doing the analysis on the people who were mentioned in them and the timelines. The story that I kind of ran quarterback on and ran point on was this Russia story about money laundering for Yelena Baturina, this Russian mob-tied crony oligarch of Putin's, who was actually in exile in London. Her husband, the mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lushkov, he had fallen out of the good graces of Putin and Medvedev in late 2010, and by early 11, him and his wife escaped to London. and had been living in exile, but still obviously wealthy as can be, with money stashed everywhere, and looking actively to get that money into the U.S., especially if you given the timeline. When they were doing this, this was when the Maidan was starting to rise in Kiev, and Ukraine was getting highly destabilized after the Yanukovych fake election.
Explain the Maidan.
The Maidan was the post. Viktor Yanukovych was a Putin-installed despot in Ukraine, and backed because Putin wants to sort of maintain a buffer sphere between his core Russian quote-unquote sovereignty and some of the former Soviet republics like Belarus and Ukraine, who he views as his satellites. And the Ukrainians were fed up with this. They were looking to westernize both the economic rationale as well as to maintain their sovereignty and take back their sovereignty. And that's when the Maidan kind of came to a head, where you had this Ukrainian revolution starting with protests in the central square of Kiev. And Yanukovych was pushed out in a coup with a democratic mandate. And Russia was none too pleased about this, but the Russian nationals who were, had looted their own country as well as Ukraine and others for so many years, they recognized that sanctions were probably going to be a higher and higher risk going forward. So there's a lot of efforts by Russian oligarchs to try and get money into the U.S. And Yelena Baturina, she decided to call her friendly neighborhood vice president's son and work with him and his guys, who are not the, I look at some of their emails and I look at them as kind of Keystone Cop bankers. They were hardly the world beaters you'd think of with white glove banking service like Goldman Sachs, but they were enabling her through their securities firm, one of the firms that was working with the advisory firms and the private equity firms. Rosemont Seneca, Rosemont Capital was a securities firm called Burnham Financial. And Burnham actually has a long history. If you ever remember hearing about Drexel Burnham Lambert, the firm in the 80s, where Michael Milken built the sort of, the junk bond mechanism that made him fabulously wealthy and kind of changed the way lower credit companies tapped credit markets, capital markets for debt.
Guardians at the gate.
Guardians at the gate. So Drexel Burnham Lambert was a sort of like long-term, very old investment bank, and Burnham was spun out after Drexel had all these fines after Milken's episode. So Burnham was a standalone, but it wasn't doing very well. And John Burnham was working with Hunter Biden and Devon Archer. He's the chairman of this securities firm. Hunter was later vice chairman of the security firm. So these connections run very, very deep and very, very tight. And you can connect these people. And Burnham Securities was going to effectuate bank accounts and brokerage accounts for Yelena Baturina. And because as a securities firm, you have to have a prime broker, a bigger bank that clears your transactions, settles them, and is a custodian of them. And J.P. Morgan was the clearing firm and the prime bank for Burnham. And so they had to get her approved by J.P. Morgan, and J.P. Morgan, being one of the largest global investment banks, has pretty stringent policies in place on anti-money laundering and know your customer. KYC, AML is sort of how you refer to it on Wall Street. And she was on a watch list. And the email traffic that I uncovered and made public, and although Russia, the emails that pertain to this case, I've uploaded to a Scribd account, SCRIBD, where if you just search Scribd Matthew Tyrmand, you'll find 24 emails.
Yeah.
More than that, 24 strings with multiples of that in terms of email traffic, where they talk about how difficult it is to get her into the system. It shouldn't have, a billionaire coming into J.P. Morgan is usually a rubber stamp.
Was it like a broker-dealer, a BD?
BD is a broker-dealer, yeah. Burnham was the broker-dealer they used. Yeah. And broker-dealers have a investment bank that has a prime brokerage unit that clears their transactions.
Gotcha.
In Burnham's case, it was J.P. Morgan. So Burnham was going to rubber stamp her for approval no matter what. They wanted to get her money in and invest it for her and take whatever fees, as well as fund some of their investment projects as principals. But J.P. Morgan needed to approve. J.P. Morgan is, that should be the highest level gold standard of American legal compliance. And watching how they moved her through the system, with J.P. Morgan expressing reservations at first, but ultimately green-lighting her for an account, saying, and there's an email where John Burnham's relaying it to the Hunter Biden team. Well, she wasn't convicted of anything, so even though she's on a watch list, we'll open the account.
What was the $3.5 million for exactly?
There's no notes on it that says this is for that, but what it looks to be is a fee for helping her get money into the U.S. In August 2014, it was in January 2014 that they started this process and got her an account. by August 2014, Devon Archer, who is a board member of this Burnham Securities Group, he's talking in their board meeting. You can get this from the board meetings also, which I posted on the Scribd account. He's talking about how he's invested already within 6 months, 7 months, $200 million worth of capital deployed into investment opportunities for her. So he's out there saying it. This actual document I got was the board minutes, and it was used in USA versus Galanis federal case against Jason Galanis, one of their partners, where Devon Archer's bragging about this $200 million that they brought in via Yelena Baturina. Okay,
Matt. So let me ask you this, because you got all this information when?
I got access to the account at the very beginning of October. I started talking to Bevan and my contact late September, and I was able to get into the account and start looking at it in the first week of October.
So September, October 2019, correct?
No, 2020. No. This past month.
So the reason that I ask it that way is because a year ago, apparently all this information was available to Chris Wray and the FBI, correct?
Well, that would have been the laptop, not Bevan Cooney's. I mean, certainly they have subpoena powers.
Okay.
Of course, it could have been available to them if they wanted to go that way. But I mean, this case is so...
So none of this information you're talking about right now, this is all from Cooney. None of this was in Biden's laptop.
I don't know what's fully in Biden's laptop. I've sort of kept to my swim lane and gone through Bevan's because there's so much material.
Got you.
I would assume, and this is something I said on Laura Ingram's show, which is, get Bevan out of there, because if there's any doubt, certainly about the provenance of Hunter's emails, but also the veracity, are they really his? The left is out there saying it's a Russian disinformation campaign.
Yeah, well, Adam Schiff came out with that immediately, and it's been denounced by Ratcliffe.
That's right. Certainly the the Bevan emails matched up against the Hunter emails would be corroborative, so there'd be no doubt about the veracity and the legitimacy of those Hunter emails.
So there's two investigations here. There's two investigations here. There's the Evan Cooney emails that you have access to. And you've published, and people are now taking a look at, which is in essence what looks like a money laundering scheme of epic proportions, money changing hands. And this goes all the way up to some of the largest financial institutions.
Yes, not just JP Morgan, Skadden Arps, the top firm on Wall Street that does all the legal work for Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan for their IPOs and all sorts of big legal documentation. They were sitting in on the meeting where Yelena Baturina was signing her documents for JP Morgan and this other bank, Bank of California.
So if this is new information from Cooney's emails, and let's suggest that it wasn't, let's give the FBI the benefit of the doubt, Chris Wray the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't on Hunter's laptop that they've been looking at for a year. Has anybody contacted you from Justice, from the FBI, anybody, intelligence, asking for copies of this to investigate?
Well, it's not incumbent upon them to contact me. It's incumbent upon them to contact Bevan. They know where he is. After I was on Laura Ingraham on Monday evening, this story obviously got a lot bigger, a lot more visible. More people became aware of it. And Bevan the next morning, less than 12 hours later, was moved from his sort of low security facility for, short and medium term stay, white collar infractions, and moved to a more secure, what you'd think of when you think of a prison, which fitted, given the crime he was convicted of, would certainly be a little bit of an overkill. Their rationale was, now that he's super visible, it's protective, but it does also look retributive. So they moved him to solitary confinement, 5x8 cell, in a secure facility, adjacent to this minimum security facility. And he disappeared off the grid for the better part of a day, and his family was worried, and I was talking to them, and we put out some pieces to kind of make some noise about it. And, what I've heard from my sources on the inside of the administration and, in different places within the government complex, is that they're very aware of what's going on with Bevan. And what I'm hopeful for, I don't have it verified or validated, but I've heard some murmurings, and they're not going to proverbially show me all their cards because I'm a journalist. And they know that I'm going to, try and go public with a lot of things, because I think that's a great way to not only make people aware, the American people aware ahead of an election about the criminality, but also because, this is, I'm a big believer in transparency, and everybody knows that. I try and put things forward to the public sphere so that people are aware of what's going on. The government works in a slightly different mechanism, obviously, as they should. And what I'm hoping is this move to solitary is a a precursor step to the feds coming in and picking Bevan up so that they can talk to him, go through his emails with his guidance, and actually put some of these crimes together, because they are really overt and brazen. You read the emails, and I encourage people to read the articles they're cited in, as well as the script page where I posted them, because they are overwhelming. And I think this is a new story, this Russian money laundering operation, that hadn't been addressed. But what Fox broke the other day was that the FBI was involved in and maybe still it might even be a still open and active investigation into Hunter Biden and transnational money laundering. I mean, this is, the apotheosis of transnational money laundering. The entire OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, run by the Treasury, it's a watch list for people like Putin and those in his circle. This exists to make sure that dirty money coming from dirty places like Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, Venezuela, the Middle East, Cuba, places that there's criminality at the very highest rungs, and with the U.S. having the largest economy, crony oligarchs and crony despots like to bring their money into the U.S. because the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency, and it's the easiest to move around the world to purchase assets, to hide,
so
etc.
I got a couple of other questions for you, because I know you've got a heart out here, but I do want to know a couple of things from you. First of all, before we get to the reaction by the media to this and how they're treating you, the question that I have is, not to sound like the guy with the cotton strings on the pegboard, okay? Because there's so many moving parts to this, which is confusing most folks that don't focus on this stuff. Simplify it from the standpoint, you have proof that, quote unquote, the big guy is Joe Biden, that took up to 50% of these proceeds, correct? Is there an actual?
No, I don't. It doesn't. I don't think it looks like this as much. It looks like between what Tony Bobulinski's put forward and the laptop has put forward. This is not in the Bevan Cooney emails. There's a lot of references to trading on his name and to the proximity to power that gets them access to do business with crony oligarchs and crony despots. But those emails, Rudy and Steve's and Tony Bobulinski's, show that Joe Biden Sr. was cut in on these deals. And, I can't speak fully to the veracity of that beyond what I see in the emails I've gone through suggests that they were certainly using the Biden name and the Biden stature imprimatur to get access to close business deals, and some business deals that were not in America's best interests. These guys, with their China company, Bohai Harvest, BHR, Bohai Harvest Rosemont, they successfully purchased a strategic asset, Hennig's Automotive. It was a $600 million deal, and this was a company that had both consumer and domestic industrial outputs and products. OEM, an equipment manufacturer for big auto, but also military contracting stuff. They were building things for the military. So the Chinese coming in and having Bohai BHR orchestrate this, using Hunter Biden to help lobby for it, definitely should be cause for concern. Definitely has some national security implications, as does the depth of the business they did in places like Russia and China. Just the fact they did so much business there means those players, they get what the left is always trying to suggest they have on Trump, which is called compromising information. So I think that Hunter's activities absolutely pose a national security risk that needs very in-depth analysis. Joe Biden is going to, in theory, I don't think he wins. I think he loses in a landslide even before all this stuff came out. I think polling is dishonest, and Trump is actually pretty popular around the country on merit, jobs, wages, sovereignty, regulations, role of government. I mean, lots of different reasons why I think most Americans feel rather positively predisposed to Trump, despite what the lying mainstream press puts forward with fake polling, with D+20 sampling all the time. But let's say, in this scenario that I think is unlikely, but it could happen, Joe Biden is elevated to the highest office, not only in the land, but on the globe. And then all of a sudden you have all this stuff for years of activity that Hunter did in Russia and China. That's compromising. That has national security implications. And so it needs to be well vetted. His activity needs to be well vetted, and how close he was to Hunter's crony boondoggles. Was he? I mean, this needs to be vetted and investigated, analyzed, and put forward so the American people can make a clear choice.
One of the questions that I was going to ask you was why hasn't Chris Wray focused on this, or at least publicized any of this in the last year? And you're saying that this is not information that he may be disposed to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the inner workings of the FBI, which, which
Okay.
cases and open investigations is the
You
FBI
don't know
director being
anything
briefed on.
about the supposed underage, niece and the naked
I mean,
porn or
on
whatever.
that stuff, I'm like you and everybody else. I'm watching along. I
Yeah.
will say that the stuff that I see them put forward, especially about the business side of things, certainly is corroborated by what I've seen firsthand with my prima facie evidence from
Okay.
Bevan Cooney's emails. But
Now
I
the
can't talk
left,
about pedophilia or any of the other stuff that's flowing
right.
around that's rather tabloid and salacious. I'm interested in the forensic auditing of the business deals and what kind of implications that has in law breaking and violating, American statutes and putting us at risk.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now the left are coming out hard against you. First, they ignored it. They
Yep.
suppressed it. If you're on, the New York Post article that's now famous that
Yeah.
got, 1,000% more eyeballs than it would have otherwise gotten if they just let it go. But now it's a
Hey,
free
everyone in
speech
LA
issue.
knows about Streisand effect, so.
The Streisand effect, correct. So that is obviously in the news right now. And, one of the things that I've seen repeated by many different people over the past week is that Donald Trump got impeached for Joe Biden's crimes.
Yeah,
Right?
pretty much. Look, the left is masterful at accusing us of doing what they actually do. These are very bad people. They have lost their grip on global technocratic elitist power structures. Trump has been amazing for not just sovereignty in the U.S. but sovereignty in Europe and around the globe.
Yeah.
He respects sovereignty. He believes sovereignty is a fundamental right of nation states, which I concur with. And you've got supranational governance that's run amok the last 20, 25 years, the WTO, the WHO, the UN, the EU, the US in putting themselves in a worse position with supranational governance, multilateral deals like the Paris Accord, like NAFTA was. We always seem to get the short end of the stick when globalist technocratic elites are drawing up our treaties and our pacts and our trade deals and all of this. So the left has been, taken to the woodshed by a democratic mandate, not just in this country, but in places like Central Europe. And then in Western Europe, where, the alternative right parties, the pro-sovereignty parties are moving up. Whether that's in France or we saw Brexit, obviously, or Sweden or Germany or Austria or the Netherlands or Belgium. They're all having more and more success and gaining more and more traction for an alternative right party that believes in nation state sovereignty and not ceding its national decision-making to supranational governance. Yeah. And so the left is apoplectic that they've lost their hands controlling these levers. And some of these people, these media elites that are involved in policy and politics, they're running active disinformation campaigns while they scream Russia, Russia, Russia. I'm getting accused of being a Russian agent all the time. Meanwhile, I exposed money laundering of Russia.
Well, let's finish up with that, because you and I met Adam Schiff last year together at an event when he came out with the whole impeachment thing, and he was just pushing that, shoving it down America's throat, foie gras style. And we know that he was lying to America for 3 years regarding having actual intelligence seeing proof of Russian collusion. His immediate response to all of this is that it's Russian collusion again. And
no proof.
They say that when you're taking the most flack, that means that you're right over the target, Matt.
That's what Steve Bannon is saying, and it's very accurate.
And you're now over the target. Talk to me about the response. There's an Atlantic article coming out. What's been the response from
the Atlantic article that came out yesterday, there's some history there. That was written by one of the most fraudulent talking heads in the history of our modern age, Anne Applebaum, who is an unhinged, coercive, dishonest fraudstress. She's got triple citizenship. The U.S., she's an American, but also Poland. She married the Polish former foreign minister, Radosław Sikorski, who was also a Brit. So she also has British citizenship by way of him. So she lost in Brexit, she lost in Trump, she lost in Polish right, and she is spinning her wheels like crazy, writing about any of these mandates. The Brexiteers or Trump or the Polish right. They're all totalitarians because they didn't elect her cohort, her worldview, her political class. So she came after me. I've been calling her out for what she's done for years. If you remember, we've known each other for a while. In 2016, I wrote an article about her and her disinformation, and I immediately got smeared as an anti-Semite. The irony is that I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
And the Washington Post wrote an editorial. Trump normalizes anti-Semitic bigotry, citing my analysis of her work, saying it was an anti-Semitic screed and blah, blah, blah. And she orchestrated that, obviously. She's being a Washington Post editorial board member, I believe, and one of their correspondents, and writes for them column pretty frequently. So, you know, these people will go after Jews and call them anti-Semites if they don't hew to the leftist line or the globalist line. So I've got some history with her and her husband. I've written about her husband's corruption. You know, their whole cabal, their political party platform, Obitelska's civic platform, was looting the country for years, and that's why they lost the election so dramatically in 2015, 14 and 15. And she's just, she thinks that I'm, you know, the devil, and, you know, the feeling's mutual. But what she wrote in her Atlantic piece was just absolute bilious claptrap, total drivel. And I'll be responding to it. I mean, even from the first line, she gets the first fact wrong. She said on Tuesday, Laura Ingraham had Matthew Tyrmand on. It's actually Monday. But because she's in Poland, she saw the next day. So something as basic as fact checking what day I came on to break this story, she only views things through the lens of her own solipsism. Only in her experience does anything matter. So she saw Tuesday, so to her it's a Tuesday breaking story when really it was a Monday. I know it sounds kind of petty, but it just, to me, it's psychologically instructive that she can't even get the most basic elemental facts right because she doesn't really care. For her, everything is an exercise in information narrative setting and false narrative setting. So she wrote about me and all sorts of pejorative episodes. I'm going to deconstruct every one of them. I'm working on a piece already, and I've got some really good oppo on her that I have never actually used before that I'm looking forward to making public, just to expose how big a fraud she is.
Wow.
And her husband, and she never talked about her husband's corruption when she talked about why her husband's party got turfed out. Well, he was corrupt. I mean, there's a famous case, the Affair Kilometrov, the kilometer affair, where he was taking full, you know, when they give you like per diem, so they pay you for use of your car. He had 2 drivers, but he was taking the monthly maximum as if he was driving himself everywhere on his 2 vehicles as a payment or an expense, and they were paying him. So, I mean, they were looting in big ways and small ways, and he was using his security detail to do his personal errands. I mean, this guy, he was caught on tape, hidden tape, talking about how it's his right as an elite leader of Poland to eat octopus on the taxpayer dime as much as he'd like. These are very vile, spoiled, petulant people who've lost control, lost mandate, and they lash out by spreading lies very aggressively. In fact, Sikorsky's lawyer, who had threatened to sue me for hate speech of all things because I'd written about some of his well-documented corruption, just editorially, not even investigatively, just editorially, they threatened to sue me for hate speech.
What was hate, besides the fact he hated you writing about it?
Well, that's what these, well, anything, you know, and they, at that moment, they had the courts, they had, you know, control of the country. So they were trying to bring me to court to sue me for what I was writing. And this was just on social media. And I said, bring it. Let's have a debate on First Amendment speech. I'm a big believer in the Zenger trial in 1730s provincial New York, where the German newspaper, John Peter Zenger, he was writing about the provincial mayor stealing the excise taxes, and they threw him in jail. And he was tried, and it set an amazing precedent in sort of American jurisprudence that truth is an absolute defense. And that actually got codified, you know, 50, 60 years later in the First Amendment and in the way that we handle the free press. So I'm a big believer. Truth is an absolute defense. I've got truth on my side. So I told them, yeah, let's do it. Let's rock and roll. You want to have a lawsuit? Let's go to it. Of course, they never followed through. But the irony is that his lawyer, Roman Gertic, who was the former deputy prime minister and education minister in that government 10 years ago, or 8 years ago, 9 years ago, he was just arrested last week for corruption. So I think Sikorsky's tweeting about me all the time. I think he's got bigger problems. And he's tweeting about me while he's, and Applebaum and Sikorsky both have blocked me on Twitter, but they talk about me all the time. So that doesn't really suggest that she's a credible journalist, because she's not willing to have debate and discourse or peel the onion on actual facts to see what they are. She just throws around invective in a very ugly, pejorative way. And he also talks about me all the time. And he's supposed to be a statesman. He's always marketed himself around the globe as a statesman. So I think it's incredibly ironic. As I said on Polish television, the amount of times he's tweeted about me the last week, it's bordering, and with pictures too, it's bordering like on an unhealthy obsession. Here he is, he's supposed to be a happily married guy, and he's just tweeting pictures of me all the time. Yeah, it makes me a little worried, a little bit of wondering what's going on in his head. That's a
little creepy as well.
It's very creepy. Yeah. You know what? It's creepy in that way, but these people are creeps in the other sense as well.
So talk to me real briefly here, Matt. We're about a week away from the election. Most people are going to be hearing this. What's the next step here? Biden loses. Does this continue? Biden wins. Does it get squashed?
I think that if Biden wins, it's obviously more of an uphill battle. But the good thing is if investigations are ongoing, and I know that the feds are investigating certain components of this criminality around Hunter Biden, I think that would be a scandal. They tried to go after Trump for pulling the plug on fake investigations. Well, these are very real. And I think there are enough good people in the FBI, even if the fish is rotting from the head, that there will be some follow through. It's the same thing I think about Durham, and I've given this a lot of thought about Barr and Durham investigating, everything with the fake Russia hoax and the Steele dossier and Hillary Clinton's emails. I think they're finding so much and they're doing so many subpoenas and depositions that they didn't want to rush things in to get in ahead of the election just for the political reasons. And I agree with that. A lot of people on the right and conservatives, Republicans I talk to are so pissed that where's the Durham report? Well, Durham's an honest guy, and I think Barr's an honest guy, and I think they believe that the role of justice is to deliver justice, not to sway an election or not to, yes, it would be nice if the American public was more informed, but we know that there's a lot of chicanery around there, and we've already seen, reports of the proofs that the Steele dossier is fake, the FISA unmaskings was extrajudicial. It was certainly an act of misconduct. So I think Durham will come out with what he's discovered when the time is right and the investigation kind of concludes. I don't think it is correct for him to rush it for political reasons to please, the administration or the American right. It's not his job. His job is justice. So I don't have a big issue with it. I think that justice will ultimately be served. I hope that, it is served in its fullest capacity, and that would obviously be with the second term of the Trump administration. I don't really have much of a worry. I think Trump's going to win a massive landslide. We could do a whole other podcast about my election analysis going around the country. I'm in, even during COVID, I've been in 20 states this year, or 15 states. And I'm, doing a lot of work on the ground. And I think that it's going to be an absolute landslide. So I think that'll help deliver justice.
I'm in a total agreement with you. And I said this last night at the event with our mutual friends. I said that I think we're even going to add a couple of seats, maybe 1-2 seats in the Senate. I think Michigan.
I think so too.
Minnesota, Alabama are flippable. We may lose Colorado. We may lose Maine. But I think at the end of the day,
that's exactly my analysis. Is we pick up Michigan, John James is going to win Michigan. Alabama's a default. It's over. It's done. We got Alabama back. But then I think Minnesota is fertile ground. I think Jason Lewis is going to beat Tina Smith. And so those three. And then I even think Susan Collins is going to be okay. Tillis is going to be fine. Joni Ernst is going to be fine. Maybe the one seat we lose is Cory Gardner, but he's always been kind of a weak candidate in a state that used to be red, then purple, and now is kind of blue.
It's California East.
Yeah, and that being said, it's the Colorado blueprint. They did this by design 10, 15 years ago. To flip it. They did a good job. That's politics. New Mexico is going to go for Trump. I think Oregon is in play. Virginia is in play. Even New Jersey and Connecticut are in play, though the mass ballot sendouts, because they're doing unsolicited absentee ballot sendouts, that's going to make New Jersey and Nevada tougher because there'll be a few days for leftist operatives to hoover them up.
Do you have another minute? Because I want to get your impression on the mail-in ballot potential fraud issue.
Sure.
So talk about that from the standpoint, because this is unprecedented. We've got states, many of them don't have the organizational structure to deal with this. And now we've got states like Pennsylvania, thanks John Roberts, that is going to allow postmarks 3 days post. So talk to me about that impact.
Yeah, look, Pennsylvania was, I predicted in 2016 that Trump would get 311 electorals. He got 306. I kind of flipped a few pieces here and there, but most notably, I thought he'd win Minnesota, which he only lost by less than a point, and that he'd lose Pennsylvania because of voter fraud in Philly and Pittsburgh and Erie and some other places, Reading, Harrisburg. Now my view is that Pennsylvania is going to be won by such a margin it won't matter. Same thing with a lot of Wisconsin, Michigan. Minnesota might be a little tighter. Nevada, you've got the Clark County machine and all those unsolicited ballots. That's going to be a little tougher. But I actually think that the Hispanic vote is going to be so strongly for Trump, it may even be over 50%, that the American Southwest is going to be strongly for Trump. Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico. New Mexico's been a Dem state, but they really appreciate securing the border because it's the people on the ground, many Hispanic legal immigrants or third, fourth generation Mexicans and other Hispanic peoples. They're the ones who face the degraded wages and the increased crime from having an open border in New Mexico. It's their kids who have to go to school in Albuquerque that are at risk of taking a stray bullet during cartel gang wars.
What's the first state that comes in on Tuesday, November the 3rd, that you're going to be looking for to determine the direction of the election?
Florida and I think
Carolina.
Florida he'll be fine. I think he even wins Miami-Dade.
Yeah.
Florida will kick it off pretty well, but then also those early Rust Belt states, New Hampshire, because he only lost by around a point last time, and that one I think he's going to win by 5 to 7 points. New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and then as you move to the Midwest, that's going to come in later because those polls close an hour later. So Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Well, as we're speaking right now, Barack Obama is speaking to a dozen people with a bullhorn.
Yeah, big giant carrot.
In Florida. So they're down there for a reason. The whole discussion that we've been hearing for the past couple of weeks is that, Texas is purple and Georgia's purple. Take a look at where they are. They're in Pennsylvania and they're in Florida.
Yeah. They're not going to win those historically Republican states. I think turnout on the Republican side is going to be absolutely massive, and the enthusiasm gap matters. That drives turnout.
Matt Tyrmand, tell everybody where they can find you, follow you on Twitter. And
just follow me on Twitter because I do a lot of freelance stuff. I post something here, I post something there. At Matthew Tyrmand, MatthewTyrmand.
We've got it here under your under the screen with the Chiron. And listen, Matt, next time you're on the West Coast, we got to get back together again and go skulk out some other politicians. It was great chatting with you, man.
Maybe even have a few beers, Dave.
And a whiskey or two.
Whiskey politics.
Get some rest, man. You're one of the hardest working guys right now in journalism and politics. Thank you so much for everything that you do, and greatly appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Dave. You're a good man. Keep doing what you do as well.
Likewise. Cheers, Matt.
Later, pal.
Thanks, Matt. And a lot more information I know is coming out as well. We talked off camera. Everybody needs to follow him on Twitter and make sure that they're updated with all the news, because by the time it gets to mainstream news, this election is going to be over, unfortunately. The gatekeepers of the information are really, really scaring me right now. It's like China, totalitarianism, really scary. With that being said, I do agree with his assessment regarding the election. In fact, I tweeted something very similar to what he stated before we actually had our interview. I believe we're at 54, 55 seats by the time this election is over. If what I'm hearing on the ground, forget about the polls, forget about the media, it's suppression polling. We know this, that the enthusiasm that we're seeing right now for Donald Trump, you may not like the man personally, you may not like all his tweets, but it's his policies. Take a look at what just happened last week with the Middle East. 40, 50 years of presidents have never been able to achieve what this president has done in just 3.5 years. Absolutely incredible. And obviously, the economy can go in one of two major directions. I've said it all along that this is a binary choice election. With that being said, however, Donald Trump needs the Senate and he needs the House. And I truly believe that Minnesota is very flippable right now for the Senate. I think Michigan will flip for the Senate. I believe that Alabama is going to go back red again as well. I think that we hold in Iowa. I think that we hold in North Carolina. Maine is kind of, too close to call. And I think Colorado is looking very tough right now for Cory Gardner. But, even if we lose Colorado, California East, as I call it, I've got a family member that's seriously looking at moving there right now, we are looking at not only just keeping the majority, but maybe adding to the majority as well, which bodes extremely well when Justice Breyer, maybe Justice Thomas decide that time's up for them over the next 4 years if Donald Trump wins. If it goes the opposite direction and we end up with Schumer and we still have Pelosi in the House, listen, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but the country's over. These people are telling us. They are telling us what they want to do. They want to dramatically change the Constitution, adding to the Supreme Court maybe 3-4 seats to the Supreme Court so that there's now 12, 15, 20. Where does that end? They want to make Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico a state. That's 4 more Democrat senators. They're going to be shutting down our protections in First and Second, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. So this is a definite binary choice. And I know we've got a lot of folks that watch this show that are maybe left of center, consider themselves moderate. We've even got some never Trumpers that watch this show. And I've got no problem with you if you have a problem with President Trump. I get that. A lot of people have a problem with his personality. But you cannot in any way call yourself a conservative in the mold of a Ronald Reagan, who every conservative, including never Trumpers, absolutely loved. You cannot call yourself a conservative and vote for Joe Biden, because it isn't you're not voting for a moderate Democrat that's been in politics for 47 years. I was 4 years old when he entered politics. I'm now getting invitations for the double ARP. But if you are voting for this man, you're voting for the AOC plus 150, as she just said. Stop calling it AOC plus 4. It's AOC plus 150. And don't call me AOC anyway. That's disrespectful. This woman has never run a family or a household. She's never run a business or made payroll. But she wants to come in and restructure complex economic systems. And there are so many brain dead, low information voters that vote with their emotion and just absorb the propaganda and the agitprop from the mainstream leftist media and social media. It's absolutely insane how dumb our country has become. And I know a lot of people on the left feel the same way about conservatives. I just watched the Borat sequel, unfortunately. And I didn't want to after reading my good friend Christian Toto's review. But I felt that I needed to, because I've got to talk about, obviously what's happening in the mainstream media and everything. Everything is focused on Rudy Giuliani. And first of all, he went after a 15-year-old. He did not know she was 15, and she did not look 15. She looked like she was in her 20s. She was a good-looking reporter. If you've seen this thing, by the way, don't bother. It's not funny. And I loved the original Borat. I saw it in the theater. I was literally laughing out loud to the point that my stomach hurt. It was shocking and hilarious and smart and new. This sequel, which Amazon is shoving down our throats. I mean, it's taking up the entire. It's like when BLM and George Floyd happened. They're just using their real estate to make everybody watch this thing, because he's going after conservatives. And he's not going after conservatives. He's going after the character that leftists portray of conservatives, right? The backcountry, white supremacist hicks. This is what he believes is conservatism. This is who he believes are conservatives. And this is what Amazon and the tech titans and the mainstream media want us to believe is conservatism. That's what it is. It isn't because it's a good film, because it's not. I didn't chuckle once, never mind laugh. And I love comedy. Okay? It was just really bad. But Rudy Giuliani, first of all, the poor guy, he's a little older. He probably hasn't had a good-looking girl approach him in 25 years like this. And she was very flirtatious. They, for some reason, go into the bedroom. There's a lot of very suspect editing on this. She go into the bedroom. He sits on the bed, and she's putting on a microphone in his jacket, pulling out his shirt. You can see this. Your lying eyes do not deceive you.
She's 15. She's too old for you.
Why are you judging?
She's my daughter. Please, take me instead. Take my anus.
No,
take my anus. Do not have her.
I'm better than him.
No.
And then he leans back onto the bed to push his shirt back down his pants. And the Twitter robots are now saying he was grabbing his junk. Oh my God. He's going after a 15-year-old. First of all, she's not 15. They made her character Borat's daughter, but in no way did she in any way let Rudy know that she was a teenager, because first of all, she wasn't, and she certainly didn't look like one as a reporter. But Rudy's a man, and I don't know what his domestic situation is. I don't care, quite frankly. And he wasn't going after her. She was going after him, but he didn't grab his junk. Folks, use your own eyes. I sounded like Joe Biden there, right? Come on, man. Use your own eyes, folks. Come on, fat. Listen, fat. Holy cow. Okay, I'm just going to leave it with this, all right? I'm very optimistic about the election. What Matt said in our interview, I've been saying now for weeks. I put up, one of those get to 270 maps, and I had people saying, you're absolutely insane, right? I believe he comes in over 300 electoral votes, as long as voter fraud doesn't become the main issue. And it very well may. It very well may. We know what they've been pushing since the very beginning of COVID. So I'm very optimistic, but that means that you shouldn't rest on your laurels, that you need to get you, your spouse, your kids, your parents, your family, your friends to the polls. If they don't think it matters, if they don't like Trump, and you know what, Biden seems like a nice old guy, it's not a problem, that's what they're trying to do to you. This is a Trojan horse. This is a Manchurian candidate. Joe Biden, the Joe Biden that we saw in that second debate, he came off of 4 days of rest. 12 days out of an election. The man is taking 4 days off. Why? It's not for rehearsal. He didn't need rehearsal. He had an iPad with the notes being fed to him by his handlers off stage. You saw that. They picked up the iPad after he took his notepad off. He didn't need rehearsal. The man is aged out. His shelf life has expired. And I truly believe, a friend of mine said this, and I think I tweeted or I posted it somewhere. A friend of mine said that he saw Joe Biden in Nashville, and that the Joe Biden that we see on TV, we think he looks old. My friend said he saw him in person, and the man looks like a fossil. This is not a man that's going to last 4 years, never mind 8, as president. And so what they've got in the wings, the understudy, is the most progressive, vehemently divisive senator that I think we've ever seen. And that's in a Senate where you've got Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. She's the most liberal progressive in there. So if you don't like Kamala Harris, you better vote for Donald Trump and vote for your senators, Republican senators, vote for your congressmen. I truly believe we can take back the House. Okay? We need, 17 seats to flip the House. That's entirely possible. 6 of them, I think, go through extremely deep blue California. You want to hear something? I'll finish with a quick anecdote here. I've got a family member, not blood, okay, an in-law. And this person is absolutely, when we think of Trump derangement syndrome and the pussy hats and the whole thing, this is her, right? I have to run away from her at family gatherings because I just don't want to talk politics. I want to enjoy my evening. She has announced that she is voting the entire ballot. She's not going to vote for Trump. She can't cross that hurdle, okay? But California doesn't matter anyway, I don't think, for her. But she's voting red down the entire California ticket. Think about that. Her state senator, her assemblyman, Congress, Senate, whatever it may be. Okay? She's voting for Republicans for the first time in her adult life because she's seen what's happened in California. And 90% of my family is now talking about moving. A couple of my family members have moved. And many of them may not like Donald Trump, the person. Heck, I mean, his tweets sometimes get me. Sometimes I cringe with what he says. I get it. I do. I get it. I truly do get it. But you have to be an adult about this election. This isn't about personalities. Trump is a placeholder. But the policies that he implements, the judges that he appoints, and the economy that he helps create by providing lower taxes and less regulations means that normal people who may not even focus on politics do better. They always do better. That's Econ 101. When you lower taxes and you make businesses easier to run with lower regulations, I'm not saying you should pollute the air and the water, of course not. But take off some of these burdensome regulations and you lower your taxes, more people are employed, more people pay into the tax base, and historically speaking, the revenues to the treasury of states and federal always goes up when taxes are lower. In California, they want to increase the top marginal tax rate to 16% just for the state. If you live in California and you're making good money, you're paying 62% of your money in taxes. And people are furious about it because what are they getting for it? Well, if you've driven down to LA, as I have just last night, underpasses are filled with tents and needles and defecation and homelessness everywhere and crime, and the list goes on and on and on. Meanwhile, everybody's still locked down in the city of Angels and the city of San Francisco. You can't go to restaurants. You can't, and these restaurants, many of them are going to be dealing with weather and rain, and you can't sit outside in a parking lot. It's going to be too cold. Yeah, maybe you have heaters, but these businesses are already dying. So every single vote, including California, yes, does count. Send the left a message. Send them a message that they can no longer continue using identity politics to divide us, that they can no longer continue using racism to divide us, that they can no longer project all of the things that they've done on this president. Because that's exactly what's happened for the past 4 years. Russia, Ukraine, the Steele dossier, all of that stems from Hillary Clinton's campaign. This is proven now. Absolutely 100% proven. And people like Adam Schiff, who Eric Early, if you're living in Los Feliz, Glendale, part of Los Angeles, you got to vote for Eric Early, because this will send an absolute, just a cataclysmic message to the Democrats. And if you are a common sense, left of center voter, you may own a business or you work in a business, you've got a family, you like to listen to this show because you like to remain intellectually honest and hear maybe what some people on the right are saying. First of all, thank you for watching or listening. But secondly, you gotta admit that the left are absolutely unhinged. Does this not scare you? Does leaving them unchecked not scare you? Because if they're acting like this now, where they're suppressing your First Amendment speech, they're promising to suppress your Second Amendment rights, they've already challenged Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights when it comes to due process. Take a look at what they did to Kavanaugh. You don't think for a moment that they're going to do that again? And they intend to turn this country into what they consider a utopian, it's really a dystopian vision of their Marxist ideology. If that doesn't scare you, then you're not paying attention. You need to vote. And maybe for the first time in your life, maybe you need to just kind of do what I did in 2016. Cross your fingers behind your back and vote for Donald Trump. All right, with that being said, just kind of a little rant there. Very, very special thanks to Matt Tyrmand. He's a fantastic guy. You need to follow him over on Twitter, a wonderful source of information. And if this is the last episode that you see before the election, we may have another one, but it will be right on top of it. God bless you. God bless America. And keep the faith, folks. This thing is going to end up well. I'm convinced, but you got to do your part. You got to vote. Cheers, everybody.